I'm going to go over some things today that are not exactly rocket science, but have a couple of neat little tidbits and some vocab you'll need. So most of my students have been taking notes today. There were about 10 or 12 vocab, and there were 5 study goals, right? Right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sarah, did you hear that?
Yes.
Cool.
Are you doing the PowerPoint today?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so I guess the students watching the video will just get the narration of the PowerPoint without the images.
yes, the internet is back up, but not free.
So sick. Yeah, they have a YouTube on it. Huh? I haven't played it, but I've seen it. Like, dude, you can go, you can like skydive, like pay to go with like a company up in like space, literally like road bike.
Is anybody here in my period 0 class?
And like,
Does anybody know if Michael Bangs was on campus today?
it's like
Michael Bangs? Anybody know if Julia Kupiak is on campus today?
Yeah.
Okay, kids, look. I will give you the kind of life experience that is priceless from us old people. The stuff you're really hungry for in education. Pun intended. I make burritos in giant batches. I take like whole commodity volumes and I make these huge pots of burrito mix, and then I make these giant stacks of tortillas and I roll them all and I freeze them in bags of 5 or 6 so that every morning I can eat one breakfast burrito, and I make them super honkin', so I eat it kind of at brunch time and then it stretches into my lunch as well. I use about 2 racks of bacon, about 1 bag of potatoes, 3 to 4 baskets of mushrooms, about 2 racks of chicken sausages, and I get that cooking first. In a separate pan, I take some of that bacon fat and I cook about 3 dozen eggs with a bunch of oregano, a little bit of soy sauce, and some cane sugar. It's called Tobiko style. It's the kind of egg that's slow cooked by Japanese people, by all sorts of people, but traditional in Japan for sushi, like sushi egg. Anybody ever had egg sushi? Okay, it's called Tobiko, I think. Anybody know if I've got the wrong word? Anybody speak Japanese around here? Okay, so I make that egg, slow cooked in a pan.
How many eggs?
About 36, 48, however many I can get. Then I drop all that into a big pot. I add about 1 or 2 bags of frozen rice, like wild rice mix, 1 or 2 cans of beans, tons and tons, like 2 heads of broccoli chopped up really small, a whole bunch of peppers and like 6 to 8 jalapenos. I take like 2 tubs of salsa, 2 bags of shredded cheese, about 2 cups of tapatio sauce. I have some other crazy spicy sauces that I add to that, so there's a really complex spicy structure. I mix all of that,
Yeah, well, you make all of
stack in Hugo tortillas, roll them up, and I let them cool off overnight. Then I wrap them in aluminum foil so they don't get too soggy. I freeze them in bags of 5 or 6, and I thaw one bag of 5 or 6 at a time, so I have thawed ones that I can nuke in 2.5 minutes every morning to get like a big, healthy, wholesome, moderately balanced breakfast for about $2 to $3 a day.
Are you selling these?
Nope. I just told you. That's like all you got to know. Go do it. Everybody I know, I've told them to do this. Well, it takes me about 3 hours from clean kitchen to clean kitchen. I get about 30 to 40 out of each batch.
I make my own.
Sure. Put I need your attention, please. I know that burrito thing was kind of distracting, but Sarah was stamping, so I thought we could use that time for something. She's told me that a lot of you were confused. This was assignment 2.1, because that's what it says on the board. So it's labeled 2.1. And a lot of you have asked me about that burrito recipe. Guess what? We have it on video, so maybe sooner or later we can provide that for you.
They're all going to steal your secret recipe. It's
That's
not
fine.
secret.
I'm happy to share. Food's for sharing, not for stealing. Okay. 3 fast announcements. One fast announcement. ASEPS is canceled tonight because I don't have enough parents. I hope you understand. I can provide the videos, the handouts, the student volunteers to run the place. I can provide you a safe environment for doing this. I can get the custodians to open the door and the school to support the timing and security, and bathrooms are going to be open. And I just can't get your parents. That's your job. So if you'd like after-school environmental films, at least one of you will have to ask a parent to email me. Preferably all of you should ask your parents to email me. Maybe next week we can have an after-school film. I'm ready to do my end. You gotta let me know if you can bring me a parent. Okay. Any questions about any of this? So, yeah.
Your burritos in the microwave. Just like
Thanks, I got it. Thank you. So, you guys might remember that yesterday we talked about food webs and how species in a food web depend on each other. I'm sure that you remember when you take out, for example, the plants, the herbivores have nothing to eat, or when you take out the insects, there's nothing to carry the energy uphill to the things that eat insects, and so on. And I think you understand that with the loss of certain species, other species are affected. Of course, I'm sure you're all really good students. So I'm sure you all did your homework and you read about the sea otter. And you know that sometimes there are species which are just a little more important than the others. Some species, when you lose them, they don't just hurt one other species, but instead they hurt their entire ecosystem. And we call those Keystone species. Now, I'm really bad at history, because obviously we don't need history. It's already happened, and everybody knows it'll never happen again. So I may be miseducating you with inaccurate information, but I think it was maybe the Etruscans or somebody else, anybody know, who invented this type of construction. It's a cool way to make a door. If you can't see that, I'll move my card and maybe you'll be able to see it in a minute. BITD, which stands for back in the day. people made their entryways and doorways like this, with a horizontal member over two vertical ones. In wood-based construction, these are posts and these are beams, also known as headers. But if that were stone, it's called a capstone. And obviously, back in the day when people made their doors out of stone, you can only make the door so wide because you can only find a rock so big. Does that make sense to everybody? You can't make a door bigger than your rocks because they would just collapse. Until someone figured out that you can make a door as big as you want. You can make it in that shape. You see, if I push on the middle one, it's going to expand the other ones outward. And if there's a whole building there, they have no place to go. As they try to slide in, they're wedging into a shrinking hole with a growing piece of the stone. They're keyed. So I'm going to try to do this demo thing that I think has really slim chances of working out. But I'm going to try. I think I should be able to apply tremendous amounts of force to the top. And it won't collapse because it can't move outward. I can't push any harder because my thumb's been broken a lot. Now, of course, you realize these are all loose, right? You take any one of these out and the whole thing will fall apart. Thus the name, Keystone species. There are species which, like Keystone, when you remove them, the whole thing falls apart. And there was one big example that all of you know because all of you do your homework because you're all good students. Anybody know what that is?
Sea otter.
That's right.
It's a harp seal.
And look at how cute they are! My God, they're cute. Despite being so cute, does anybody know why they nearly went extinct?
Their fur.
Yeah, they were hunted for their furs. You know, they have very little fear of humans. Like most things, when humans showed up, the sea otters didn't realize that humans were necessarily dangerous. There wasn't in their past any predator on the surface of the water. So as long as they were on the surface, they were just curious, and they'd frolic and play and tumble. They make noises when they break their food and when they chirp and they play with each other and they splash. So they're super easy to find. They're even worse than sitting ducks. They're just laying there. And unlike a sitting duck, they'll actually come to you. So if you pull up on a boat, they'll be like, oh, cool, there's something interesting in the water. And they just swim over. And you guys know what a gaff is?
Yeah.
It's a hook you use to bring a fish onto the boat. So when you go fishing, there's a heavy-ass fish. You don't want to bring them up on the fishing line. So you use what's called a gaff. It's like a big old hook, and you hook the fish and drag it onto the deck. Well, in the sea otter fur days, they would sprinkle some Scooby snacks on the surface, and the sea otters would come over to the boat, and they would just use a gaff and just bring them all up on the deck, and then just club them and skin them and get the fur. They make awesome jackets. Anybody ever seen an otter pelt? Get a chance to feel it. It's like the most amazing fur in the history of fur. It's
There's one in the Natural History Museum, I think.
Yeah. There was a fisherman somewhere up north who was arrested for having killed something like 20 otters. He was killing them because he thought they were competing with his income.
Abalone or something?
I don't remember what it was. Probably Avalon. And so he killed them all, and he strung them up in his garage, and he was making a really nice jacket for his wife. Of course, you'd never be able to wear it anywhere because it's contraband. But he had all these otter pelts strung up in his garage, and one of his neighbors saw it, and was like, are those endangered species? And he's like, shut up. And so the neighbor narked on him, and he got arrested for having 30 pelts and whatever it was.
How much further time is that?
I don't know, man. It's kind of funny. Those crimes, when you're in this environment, sound really, really, really serious. And then, if you compare that to, rapists and murderers, it doesn't sound that serious anymore. So chances are he just got some sort of a slap on the wrist. I'd be very surprised if you had any more significant consequences.
That's a lot of microwaving.
Because it's a big old burrito about to go in my belly. Anybody know what these guys eat? Yeah, they eat all sorts of shellfish. It just so happens that one of those shellfish is the sea urchin. Anybody know what sea urchins eat? Yeah, they eat all sorts of stuff, but for this story, the most important part of their diet is kelp. And by the way, quick little side trip. Does anybody know the difference between algae and plant? That's actually part of it, yeah. So it does not have roots. Algae does not have roots, does not have leaves, and does not have stems.
Is it an autotroph?
It is autotrophic. They perform photosynthesis just like plants do, but they do have one difference from plants. The structures have a different name because they have a different function. What's different between a holdfast and a root? Roots are for drinking, and leaves are for making sugar that go to the rest of the plant. But algae doesn't have tubes. Algae is not vascular. You know how you have a circulatory system with veins going into your heart and arteries going away from your heart? Kelp does not. Kelp is just a colonial organism. The holdfast is not sending any energy up to the blades, and the blades are not sending any sugar down to the holdfast. So the holdfast is the part that holds the rock. And you guys have probably seen these when kelp washes up on the beach with a little rock on the bottom. Maybe you dive or something, I'm sure you've seen them then. Well, the urchin likes to eat that holdfast, and so the whole kelp just breaks off from the bottom, and the urchin just keeps moving along the bottom. They don't even touch the entire kelp thing. They just eat that little tiny percentage of ground. And you all heard the story. We got all the otters. And so the urchins became too common. And because they became too common, we lost the kelp forest. And when you lose the kelp forest, you lose fisheries. This had massive economic impacts. We've lost entire fisheries that used to be commercially viable. A lot of my students think that we have lots of kelp now. But we used to have a continuous kelp patty from roughly Carpinteria Reef all the way north to roughly Gaviota Beach that was in the ballpark of 1 mile wide. All the way up and down our coastline.
How long ago?
As late as the early 70s, I believe. It's been photographed from the air, so aerial photography at least. Color aerial photography, yeah.
Is conserving the otter species in ecological justifications? Is it?
I would think so, yeah. Which you realize is ultimately utilitarian. We want the otter because it's connected to the thing, connected to the thing, connected to the thing, the whole stupid story that ultimately preserves our best interest. We want to eat and sell fish. Yeah.
Would you be able to show us a picture of that?
For you in particular, I have a research paper you might want to read about reintroducing kelp, and that has historical photographs. You can also Google them, but I don't have them ready for you at the moment. And if you find me that image on Google, send it to me via email, and I'll put it on the website. I'll give you an extra credit point for that. All right.
Do we message you if we have something, or do we just?
Okay, you don't have to smile anymore. You can just watch me eat it now. I'm sure glad I make my breakfast.
I have capital around muffin.
Oh, can I give you another life lesson? You guys know why I make 5 breakfast burritos?
Why?
Because nobody else will make them for me, so just shut up and go make your breakfast burritos. Moving on. Moving on. The breakfast burrito has reached that critical point where it's becoming too much of a distraction for us to waste any more time talking about it. So please, if you can, try to think or talk about something different, like this stuff.
Bacon punching my nostrils.
This is a really simple type of Keystone species. This is the simplest level. This is just plain old food web issues. We're just talking classic food web, classic ecology. But now we're going to come up with some slightly more interesting types of keystones. There's all sorts of species that are very important to their ecosystem. For example, these guys. Anybody know what those are?
Starfish.
And these guys eat almost anything with a hard shell. They basically eat everything, I think. But some of their favorite foods are like mussels and oysters and clams and scallops and blah, 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 other stuff with a shell. And so if you're like an oyster fisherman, when you're down there, you pick up your oysters, and when you're down there, you take all the sea stars and you talk to all your buddies and say, hey guys, let's just kill off all the sea stars so we got more oysters. And the mussel fishermen all got together and said, hey guys, let's go kill all the sea stars so we got more mussels. And the scallop fishermen all got together and said, hey guys, let's and the climate. So a bunch of fishermen got together and they decided let's start exterminating the sea stars. And the first time they tried, they messed it up. Because they took all the sea stars onto the boat and then chopped them up and threw them back in the water. Some of you laugh because what happens when you chop up the stomach and nervous system? They grow a new one. Technically, you can take a 5-legged sea star, and if you cut deep enough to reach the stomach and nervous system, it'll just sprout an extra leg out of that wound. And on the other hand, if you take a sea star and you chop it into 5 single legs that include a little part of the mouth and stomach and nervous system, it'll actually sprout 4 little tiny legs off that one big one and become a funny lopsided sea star. So the first time that the fishermen were chopping up all their sea stars and throwing them in the ocean, they were like, oh, now we have a real problem. Because then they made way too many sea stars. So then they thought, okay, now we really got to go after them. So Sea Star Extermination 2.0 was, let's go down there, get our oysters, put all the sea stars in a bag, and then we'll pull up close to the beach, and then we'll just frisbee them onto the sand and feed them to the seagulls. And that worked. They exterminated sea stars from many parts of the world's oceans. I think this was especially common in Southern California, but if somebody wants to get me the historical context, I'd love to be wrong about that. You can just tell me where it was. And funny thing happened. When we got rid of the oceanic predator of mollusks, the overall diversity of mollusks went down. Anybody know why?
Because of that thing with reading. I have
Because the mollusks that were getting eaten by sea stars could flourish.
Sort of, yeah. Yeah. Anybody know what monopoly laws are? Anti-monopoly, antitrust laws? What are anti-monopoly or antitrust laws? In this country, we don't allow what?
The absolute control over product where they can decide the price.
Exactly. Somebody to have absolute control of an industry. We won't let the airlines all become one airline. Because then they can charge you whatever they want. There's no competition, right? In the economic sense, we need that competition so that we have choices. And supposedly that's better for us consumers, I think. Ecologically, something really similar happens with predators. Watch this. When you don't have the sea stars, the clam, for example, can become really common. And what will that do to the population of mussels, oysters, scallops, and blah, blah, blah?
When you go down.
It'll make them go down, right? Does everybody see that? There's only enough reef, and there's only enough food for so many organisms. So if one competitor gets really, really, really successful, the other ones become less successful. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Like a monopoly, where one competitor outdoes the others? That was the thing. Now the funny thing is, sea stars don't know what ecology is that I'm aware of. Sea stars don't care about protecting your seafood diet that I'm aware of. Sea stars just like to eat stuff. And they'll eat whatever's most common because it's just most common. You have to understand this is not an intentional thing. It's a circumstantial thing. So, you know, if there's a whole lot of clams out there, the sea stars will lower the population of the leading competitor, which helps all of the losing competitors become more common. Everybody see that? If the conditions change next year and scallops start going off, well, what's going to be the sea star's favorite food? And that'll hammer them back down, letting the losers keep up. It looks like a balance. It's just a coincidence. Sea stars don't give a crap. And there's a term for it called the predator effect. When you get rid of the predator, diversity goes down. We now realize that parts of the world without sharks have the lowest fish diversity. Because one single fish will outcompete the others, and it's kind of difficult for the other ones to come back. We've seen this now with wolves. We've seen this now with sharks. We've seen it with sea stars, but we've seen it with like a jillion other things too.
Me.
I'm sure glad that I cook for myself.
Jose, we have
How's that working out for you?
pretty good.
Oh yeah? Some of your preferred burrito.
Not pretty good. It's like going to Africa and just eating a Big Mac. Just like, oh. Except we're not starving. We're very fed white kids.
The layers of embedded racism in that statement are so deep, I'm just going to have to walk around this issue.
How's that racist?
Well, because Africans are not necessarily starving. You know that Africa is a whole continent that includes first world nations.
The Congo. People are starving.
All right. Anybody know what that is?
Bear.
It's a salmon.
Water.
And the poor salmon's getting ready to swim straight into the mouth of a grizzly bear. Any of you ever been to grizzly country during salmon season? Amazing, right?
It's a pretty silly statement.
What? Yeah. The grizzly bears have it so easy. They if they want to, they can just sit there and eat crap off the floor and be perfectly filled. I mean, there are so many salmon that the bear has to spend the least amount of calories in its entire year to get the most amount of body fat in its entire year. It's called the fattening season. And the bears have to do zero work. They just go. They take their salmon, and they just walk into the shade to relax, and they plop down on their lazy, greasy backs. And they only eat like the guts and the head, leaving just the parts that you and I could eat. And then they throw the delicious, like 20 pounds of salmon fillet over their shoulder, take a big, oily, greasy grizzly pile, and apparently the fragrance is really remarkable because of all the oil in their diet at the time. And of course all the decomposing salmon all around them. So decomposing salmon plus giant grizzly piles that are extra oily. supposed to be really nar. And the grizzly bears go, and they meander back to the water, and they take a fish out, and they literally fall asleep with like salmon tucked underneath them. Because their life is just so easy at this time of year. They just wipe the salmon. A little baby bear. Of course, that part of the world is important for humans too. We go up there to cut down trees, and when loggers moved in up there, they thought, holy mackerel, this is going to be a lot of logging, but look out, there's grizzly bears in the forest, and so whenever they would see one, they would shoot one, which I think is perfectly understandable. I mean, I don't really like shooting stuff, and I understand better now that I've learned some environmental science, but it would make sense. People all over the world, if there's a scary boogeyman in the forest, you shoot it, whatever it is, like a lion or tiger, or rhinoceros, or grizzly bear. People do this everywhere. I'm not making fun of loggers or making fun of the Northwest. And by the way, Santa Barbarans did this too. Does anybody know where the original Santa Barbara mission was going to go? Before they put it to Santa Barbara? Yeah, it was going to go in Cedo. That's right. So the first scouting party was exterminated by grizzly bears. And the second scouting party had one survivor who went back to the other mission and said, hey, you guys, we can't do it in Montecito.
Do you know the hoses for the down
No, I don't. I have hoses when I'm teaching, so I'd be happy to lend you some another time. I have a ton. So for hoses, no problem.
I'm doing the passenger.
Yeah, and even then I don't know. I'm supposed to meet with him tomorrow, so I can show her where they are. I teach all the periods. You know Javier's phone? Yeah, he's a security person. He's a ground maintenance guy on campus. I've got hoses for you. I don't have to wait until yeah, right on, right on. All right. Excuse me. As we were just saying, the Santa Barbara mission was going to be the Montecito mission. They have year-round creeks that at the time were chock full of steelhead, which is salmon. And because there were salmon and creeks and hardwoods all along the riparian habitat, it used to also be just packed with grizzly bears. So we wanted the mission to be over there. It's a natural location. Instead, we had to put it over here, which was a less favorable situation because the entire downtown Santa Barbara basin was a network of wetlands, like Campus Point and Colo Point Slough and Devereaux Slough and stuff, the space between UCSB and the airport. Wetlands, coastal wetlands. All of Santa Barbara used to be coastal wetlands. They didn't want to put the mission where they put it. As a matter of fact, this was like the least favorable mission location in the entire network because they had to build an aqueduct to deliver water. They preferred Montecito because over there they had rivers that were year-round. Do you guys know that? Do you know what is the only state whose state animal is extinct in that state? Did anybody ever notice what the animal is on our flag? Yeah, it's a grizzly bear, actually, which we ain't got in our state. No, the animal on our flag is now commemorated with sadness because we've driven it to extinction within our state. Our flag does not fly over any grizzly bears.
Really? None?
Not in California.
Crazy. Where's the highest grizzly bear population in Colorado?
Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
Back to me and the loggers in the forest. And too many side conversations. If this is all about the burritos, just talk to me later. But if it's not about the burritos, just stop talking. You can imagine that a forest like this would be a really scary place to go cut down trees if there were big, giant, 900-pound bears that will eat your toddlers. And so we exterminated them all, and then within a couple of years we noticed that the trees stopped growing.
They're poop.
That's right. It just so happens that the decomposing fish and the big greasy grizzly piles add up to the largest fertilization of land on the planet. And of course, like everything else I've been telling you about, we found out when it was too late. You'll notice there's this repeating theme in my class. It's like trying to learn about anatomy by pulling out your own body parts and seeing what happens. We find out what's useful after we've gotten rid of it, and then we see like, oh, we did need the grizzly bears. We did need the sea stars. We did need the sea otter. I wish we hadn't done that. The subtitle for my class is, oh dang, I wish I had known that earlier. But remember, we live on the experiment. We only find out what the parts do when we're taking them out, and we don't have a plan B because we're living in plan A. Keystone was one of these. The grizzly bear is just one example of this. Here comes another cool one. And you should know that you don't need to copy all the words on the slides. You just need the ones that are important for you to remember the key terms. Anybody know what this is? Prairie dogs.
Oh.
Oh, I know. Yeah, cute these are. Anybody know how prairie dogs make their living?
Counting.
Oh, the holes for homes.
That's where they live. They live in a network of tunnels. What do they do in those tunnels? Accounting? No.
Who knows? They might have like schools, gyms.
They take seeds from grasses and they stash them during the fall, and then later in the year they eat the seed sprouts, which I think is super cool. Yeah, they're little farmers. Of course, those holes that litter the landscape of the American prairie, those holes are kind of dangerous if you happen to be a cow. Because cows ain't so smart. They're also kind of blind. And when they're running, if they drop a hoof into one of those burrows and they get bumped by another cow, they will break their leg and then die out on the prairie. So I would understand the ranchers thought, these prairie dogs are killing my cattle and I can't afford to keep replacing the cattle, so let's get rid of the prairie dogs. And coincidentally, this is an amazing part of American history. You know, I'm just starting to learn about guns because I want to learn how to hunt so I can get meat that has lived a natural life instead of living in a cage its whole life. So I'm getting into this like hunting thing. I'm learning about guns and learning about calibers, and apparently numerous firearm calibers were invented specifically for the purpose of shooting little stuff like prairie dogs. Back in the day, we'd say, Hana, happy 7th birthday. Take this rifle and go, I think it's called pick off the pickets. Picket picking or picket plinking. You guys know what a picket fence is? Well, prairie dogs are called prairie pickets because they stand up perfectly straight, like a picket in a picket fence. So you tell your kids, go shoot them. And when you shoot one, other prairie dogs will hear the sound and they pop up. So you shoot that one, and someone hears the sound and then they pop up. So it's like the game of whack-a-mole. Whack-a-mole is the cheap video game version of children using rifles for target practice by exterminating the prairie dog. Interesting, right? Well, like I told you earlier, I wish I'd known about this before we got rid of them all. I don't think that they are extinct. I think that their range has been reduced very dramatically. It turns out that these things are basically required to have a prairie. You know, we didn't want to replace the cows, so now we have to replace the entire prairie. We should have just replaced the cows. Because first of all, that mixing of the soil is a nutrient cycling issue. There's different nutrients in different layers of the dirt. That's why farmers till the soil. But prairie dogs did the tillage for us. Second of all, they built the home for other species. Those burrows are used by all sorts of animals that don't dig their own burrows. Burrowing owls don't burrow, they just take over abandoned burrows. And badgers, they go into a prairie dog burrow, they eat all the prairie dogs, and then they just start living there. I've always wondered the same thing, but apparently they do not dig their own holes, they expand existing holes. And badgers are way bigger than prairie dogs. Same thing I learned. And then, of course, because they eat the most common seeds, and they stash seeds underground, they help maintain a reservoir of rare seeds so that if it's a really dry year, there will be some dry seeds mixing into the soil and they can sprout. And if it's a really wet year, there will be some different species of grass that are also in the prairie so that they can survive the wet year.